Many of you guys write me and message me on things like Mastodon and Reddit, and I get YouTube comments all the time. Hey, I've never tried a tiling window manager. I want to try a tiling window manager. How do I get into this stuff? Well, today I'm going to show you a very easy way to get into the i3 tiling window manager. i3 built on an Ubuntu base, which is kind of interesting. So many distributions that ship with tiling window managers by default. There's not a lot of them, but it seems like all the ones that are out there are all Arch-based distros. Today, I'm going to take a look at Regolith Linux, which is an Ubuntu-based distribution that ships with i3 Window Manager out of the box. Let's take a look. So, Regolith Linux. This is a new Linux distribution. I say it's new. I have actually never heard of this until a couple of days ago. I came across an article on OMG Ubuntu where the guy over at OMG Ubuntu, Joey Snedden, wrote an article about Regolith Linux, and that's the first I had ever heard of this distribution. It is Ubuntu with i3 Window Manager. They have two different versions. One is, I guess, the stable version, which is based on the LTS Ubuntu, which is 1804, and then they have a more bleeding edge version of Regolith, which is built on the latest interim release, which is, of course, 1904 Ubuntu. So, just reading a little bit from their homepage here. Regolith Linux is a distribution for people that prefer a Spartan interface with polished and consistent system management. It brings together the trifecta of Ubuntu's ubiquity, i3WM's efficiency and productive interface, and GNOME's system configuration features. So, you still have that solid Ubuntu base. You, of course, have the Ubuntu repos. I don't know if snaps are enabled by default. I suspect they probably will be. But you have the i3 Window Manager, but it's configured and it has some extra stuff like some of the GNOME system configuration utilities. So, sounds pretty interesting. The screenshots, look very attractive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire this up in a VM, and I'm going to take a look at the more bleeding edge Regolith Linux, the one that is built on Ubuntu 1904. So today I'm going to try Regolith Linux. I'm just going to boot off the live image in a VM, in a virtual machine. So I'm going to run this inside VirtualBox. I'm not going to run through the installation because probably every one of you guys watching this video have probably installed Ubuntu at some point in your lives. The installer is Ubuntu's Ubiquity installer. It's basically Ubuntu's installer. They didn't bother changing any of the branding. It's the exact same slideshow as Ubuntu 1904. So I'm just going to choose Try Regolith, and it should boot me into a live environment that we can play around in. Of course, the live environment should be the i3 Tiling Window Manager. So this is going to be very much a first impression kind of look at Regolith Linux. I haven't played with it. I haven't done anything. I ran through the installation off camera just to see if it actually would install. It installs just fine because I didn't want to bother making the video if the installation was going to be a nightmare. But the installation is basically Ubuntu's installer, and it works just as Ubuntu 1904 would. So again, first impression. What are my first impressions? I like the wallpaper, and I like the fact that it has a conky on the desktop with all of the key bindings, because again, I think this is kind of geared toward new to i3 users, new to Tiling Window Manager users. You never used a Tiling Window Manager before, you want to try one for the first time. Here you go. Here's a great Ubuntu base distro. So Ubuntu is very new, user-friendly. Of course, there's nothing wrong with power users using Ubuntu. I sometimes install Ubuntu on my machines. I'm running Ubuntu Budgie actually on that laptop behind me. So the Ubuntu base is great. The repos are nice and big. You can find all the software you want to run, plus you've got the snap packs and everything else. I like the fact that on the desktop here in Regolith, you've got the conky with all your key bindings. The panel at the bottom is your standard i3 panel. I will say the background of both the conky and the panel is the solarized dark blue. So it looks like they're using the solarized dark color scheme, which is a very popular terminal color scheme especially. I also like how the workspaces are labeled here. So the panel is always going to tell you what workspace you're currently on, and as you open up Windows, other workspaces will appear in the panel. But the workspaces have a number and a color. So 1 is, of course, labeled 1, and then the color box next to it is blue. if I go to workspace 2, you got 2 and then the color green. So every workspace not only has a label for a number, but it also has a color associated with it. Very cool. So by the way, super plus 1 gets me to workspace 1, super plus 2 gets me to workspace 2, super plus 3 gets me to workspace 3, and so forth and so on. Alright, so I'm coming at this as a brand new i3 user. Of course, I'm not brand new to i3 or to tiling window managers in general, but I'm going to try to approach this like I'm a new i3 user. First thing you should do as a new i3 user is actually look at the default key bindings here in the Conky. The most important ones, of course, are going to be how do you launch a terminal, because as long as you can open a terminal, you can do anything. Super plus enter should give us a terminal. By the way, that key binding is standard in most tiling window managers. Mod key, which is usually super. You can change it to the alt key if you would rather do alt rather than super, but it's usually the super key plus enter gets you a terminal. If I super key enter one more time, I get a second terminal. Super enter one more time, I get a third terminal, and I can keep opening terminals forever. Now, how do I close these windows? Well, actually, I did not look how to close windows. Let me go to workspace 2, because on workspace 1, as soon as you open up a window, you can't see the Conky anymore. So if I super plus 2 to go to workspace 2 so I can see the Conky, how do we close a window? I'm looking. I see how to change focus, move windows. How do I close an active window? Do we have a way to close the window? You know, looking at the Conky here, I don't see the key binding to close a window here. At least I don't. Maybe they forgot to put it in the Conky. That's kind of an important one to put in the Conky though. But I don't see that they did that. But I'm going to go back to workspace 1. So super 1 gets me back to workspace 1, and I'm just going to take a guess at what the key binding probably is. In a lot of tiling window managers, and the one I typically use in my configs, super shift C for close. Super shift C does nothing. How about super shift Q for quit? That's the one. Super shift Q to quit. Super shift Q to quit. And one more time, super shift Q to quit. I wonder why they didn't put that in the Conky. Regolith devs, if you happen to watch this video, opening windows, opening terminals, or whatever is really nice that you put a lot of this in here, but how to close a window is kind of a big deal. So I would actually put that key binding definitely in the Conky for new users. Now I think the next most important thing that you want to, as a new to i3 user, want to know how to do is how to launch programs other than the terminal. Now, as long as you can get a terminal open, you can launch all your programs from the terminal. So that's why we always start with the terminal. You know, make sure you know how to open the terminal, because from the terminal you can do anything. Open programs, close programs, kill processes that are out of control, update the system, restart the system if you need to. So being able to open a terminal is great. Again, mod key plus enter, super shift Q to quit out of that program, to kill that program. But how do you get a run command prompt like dmenu or Rofi? I'm not exactly sure what run command prompt they actually have installed in Regolith, but it looks like super plus space gets us a run apt dialog. So let's try that. Super space gets us Rofi. So they have Rofi as a program launcher. Rofi's great. I love Rofi. Right now I'm using dmenu on all my systems, but I used to use Rofi too. Both are fabulous programs. So if you want to search for something on the system, so I don't know if htop is installed, but I can search for it. Start typing htop, nothing is returned, so htop must not be on the system. But Firefox is on the system. I can see because I could just arrow down to where Firefox is. But if I didn't know that Firefox was on the system, I could search for it. I could just start typing Firefox, and as soon as Firefox appears, just hit enter. I don't have to type the whole name with Rofi. I could just hit enter. Let's go ahead and launch Firefox. Let's see what version of Firefox we're on. It should be the same version of Firefox that is in Ubuntu 1904. So if I go to help and about Firefox, this is Firefox Quantum 64-bit. And super shift Q to close that. If I wanted to close all the way out of Firefox, super shift Q again gets me all the way out. And again, super space gets me the run dialog. Escape if I just want to escape out of the run dialog. So now you know how to open a terminal. Now you know how to open the Rofi run dialog. Some other programs that they have hotkeyed we have Super plus C opens the control center. So let's try that. Super C. And this looks like it's the GNOME settings manager, which is a fine control panel, if you will, standard in a lot of course, GNOME distros. I think Budgie also uses this GNOME settings manager. Anyway, it's got everything you could possibly want to change as far as settings. So we've got settings for Bluetooth, background. Let's check out the wallpapers. I'm not sure if they're using the standard 1904 wallpapers or they're doing something different. No, it looks like it's all Disco Dingo wallpapers, which is fine. If I wanted to change to a different wallpaper, I don't know. Probably something light, since the panel and the Conky are dark, a dark blue, that solarized dark look. So let's do that. So if I close that out, actually the wallpaper did not change. Did I not do that correctly? I wonder, let me Super plus C to get to the control panel. Now I changed the background according to this, but it did not change. Super Shift Q to kill all these windows if I... And it's not letting me, maybe I just didn't have focus. Select. Quit. Now the wallpaper is definitely not changing. I'm not exactly sure what to deal with that. Super B gets me to Bluetooth settings in the control center. So it looks like a lot of the key bindings are just to get to specific areas in the control center. So we got hotkeys to get to the display settings, the network settings, power settings, sound settings, and Wi-Fi settings. Super Escape gets us to the lock screen. Let's try that. Super and Escape. And this should give us some kind of lock screen, but it didn't. Let me make sure. No, I've got focus on this window. For some reason, the lock screen is not coming up, at least not in this VM. I don't know why. I no longer have a cursor. I have the little spinning circle thingy going on. I'm not sure why we didn't get a lock screen though. Now, coming at this as a new i3 user, it's great that you know how to launch a terminal and get to a run command prompt. They really should tell you how to close Windows. I've already said that, but they also should tell you how do you get a file manager. Also, they should tell you how do you get to the i3 config file so you can edit these configs to your liking. They really need all that information in this Conky. So the fact that they don't give you a key binding to open up a file manager, I really think the Regolith devs need to revisit what they're doing with this Conky. Really, you don't need all this control center key bindings. Just that's wasted space. Maybe just the one key binding to get to the control center, but all the sub programs within the control center, like Bluetooth, display, network, we don't need all of that. So let's see if we can figure out what file manager is on the system. So if I super space to get Rofi, because they're using a lot of the GNOME apps, the GNOME settings manager, and everything. By the way, I think it even uses the GNOME display manager to log in had I went through the installation rather than booting off the live environment. So it uses a lot of GNOME here, which for a new to i3 user makes this transition into the i3 world a little more palatable, right? It makes the transition a little easier because you're using a lot of the standard GNOME apps you were used to if you were using mainline Ubuntu with GNOME, for example. So I'm going to assume they're probably using GNOME's file manager, Nautilus. So if I start typing Nautilus, yes, you see files. Files is the generic name for the Nautilus file manager. So if I just hit enter right now, yeah, this is the Nautilus file manager. And let's see if I can get it to show me hidden files, because our config file is going to be a hidden file. So click the menu here and then show hidden files. We need to tick that on. And then the config for i3 is usually in .config. And then there should be a folder in here called i3. i3-regolith is actually the name of the folder on this distribution. And then you will see a plain text file called config. I'm going to right click on it. Let's see what we can open it with. Looks like the only thing on the system is gedit, GNOME's plain text editor, which is fine. And this is your config file for i3. So you could edit this. For example, we could edit the colors of the workspaces. It looks like they have 19 workspaces, each with its own color. We also, of course, will find the key bindings for all the programs that are hotkeyed. Also, if you wanted to change some of the window manager functions, like how to swap workspaces and, rotate windows amongst the stack and all of that. I mean, you could edit this. You can make i3 do anything you want to do, basically, if you want to spend some time hacking on the config. But probably what most people will want to do is just change a few things. There's probably programs you use on a daily basis that don't have key bindings in this config. For example, just speaking for myself, I use on a daily basis Vim, not gedit. So I would want to go, and if there's a hotkey somewhere for a text editor, which there probably is somewhere in this config, I want to make sure it always opens up Vim instead of gedit. Other programs I use on a daily basis, I use OBS a lot to record my videos. So I open up OBS all the time. I might want a key binding for OBS instead of having to open up Rofi and then type OBS to launch OBS. Maybe just have a quick key binding, maybe something like Super O for OBS, and then it just pops up. And I could do that if I just create a simple key binding here in this plain text file, this config. As a new i3 user or a new tiling window manager user, you really should spend some time actually reading the config. And I seriously mean that. Read the config. It looks complicated. If you're not used to doing any kind of coding or programming, some of this stuff looks like it won't make any sense, but I promise you, if you just spend some time, for example, let me just pick some lines. So right here, we've got a comment here that says start a terminal. Now that's nice. Whoever wrote this config actually put a comment here. This is how you start a terminal. Bind sim mod plus return, super plus return. So that key binding, super plus return, gets us our terminal, which is user/bin/st. It's the st terminal, Suckless's simple terminal, st. How to start a web browser. You say they left us a comment, start a web browser, bind sim mod shift return. What does that do? Well, it opens user bin sensible-browser, which is Firefox. It's where the Firefox binary lives on the system. How to kill a focus window. For example, the Conky did not show us how to kill the currently active window, the one with focus, but if you didn't know, if you knew how to get to this config file, you could find how to kill a focus window. Super shift Q for kill. So let me super shift Q, and I'm going to go ahead and close out the config. I'm not going to read the whole config. Go ahead and close the file manager. Let me open up Rofi again. Let's quickly see what is installed by default on Regolith. The ISO I downloaded was 2.3 gigs in size, so I know there's a lot of stuff installed on the system. But what? I don't know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just scroll through all the installed programs here in Rofi. So of course, we had the Nautilus file manager. We've got Compton for our compositor, which gives us this nice transparency effect in the terminal and in Rofi. We have an image viewer, Firefox, we've already seen. Gparted is also on the system. Now, Gparted is on the system since we're running it as a live image. If I actually installed Regolith, I think Gparted would be removed. I don't think they leave Gparted on the system if you actually install Regolith. It's just on the live media because sometimes you might want to use the Regolith live USB stick as a rescue USB stick. See what else we have on the system. LibreOffice was here, so we have LibreOffice, Writer, Impress, Draw, and Calc. Of course, we have a lot of the GNOME utilities like Calendar Backups, which is Deja Dupe, I believe. Cheese for a webcam. We have GNOME Disk. Our document viewer, which is GNOME's document viewer, GNOME's archive manager, which is a file roller, I believe, and some of the GNOME games like Mahjong and Mines, Screenshot. Of course, we have the GNOME Software Center. We didn't take a look at that. We probably should. Most i3 users would probably just use the terminal for installing and removing software, but if you wanted to use a graphical software center, GNOME Software Center is fine. It's not popping up anything, but we're running it off a live image. There it goes. It just takes a while. Yeah. So sometimes these things can be slow when you're just booting it directly off a live image. If it was actually installed, things would run a little faster. Other applications that are installed, GNOME's terminal, GNOME Videos, which is the old Totem video player. The disk usage analyzer, GNOME fonts, GNOME's text editor, which is gedit, Rhythmbox, which is GNOME's audio player, which is really fantastic. I really like Rhythmbox. Well, let's see, Shotwell, Simple Scan, some more games. Thunderbird is installed for our email client, Transmission, which is GNOME's BitTorrent client, which is really nice. We have Amazon. That's something from, of course, mainline Ubuntu. It's a little Amazon web app. When you open that, it actually just opens up Firefox to the Amazon store. And I guess Canonical makes a few cents if you happen to buy anything from Amazon in the next couple of days. Other than that, System Monitor. That's actually one we should check out. Since HTOP wasn't on the system, usually I like to check out system resource usage in HTOP. But since that wasn't an option, we'll go ahead and use the GNOME System Monitor this time. So if I go to Resources, I gave this VM 2 cores of my 12-core 24-thread AMD Threadripper. Now, I will say, since I didn't do an installation, this is not a good representation of system usage because we're just booting this directly off the live image, and CPU usage is off the charts. That's not what I would expect if I'd actually done a install. Also, RAM is very high. 1.4 gigs of RAM is being used, but again, this is not a good representation. So that was a quick first look, first impression here of Regolith Linux. What do I think of Regolith Linux? I think it serves a real purpose. I think a lot of people want to try out tiling window managers, but installing things like Arch and all the Arch-based derivatives, where most people, I guess, use tiling window managers, where that tends to be like, there's not a lot of tiling window manager distros out there. I mean, distros that ship with tiling window managers by default. Manjaro has some tiling window manager editions. Arco Linux has some tiling window manager editions, and some other Arch-based distros, but it tends to be Arch-based distros. You know, a newer to Linux user, somebody that's only been on Linux maybe 6 months, maybe is not wanting to jump into the Arch world. They want to stay on Ubuntu, for example, and there's no Ubuntu-based distros out there that I know of other than Regolith now that ships with a tiling window manager by default. So I think this serves a real purpose. It fills a niche, because I hear from you guys a lot that, hey, I want to try out a tiling window manager, but I'm not ready to jump into Arch or Gentoo or anything like that. Well, here you go. You've got basically everything in Ubuntu 19.04. This is basically Ubuntu 19.04 with i3 on it, already pre-configured for you. So overall, from what I've seen, just spending, half an hour or so in a VM, just booting it off a live image, I'm pretty impressed with Regolith Linux. I will definitely be keeping up with how it advances in the future. Hopefully we see more releases in the future with Regolith Linux. Before I go, this show was made possible by Ansem, Chris, the other Chris, Douglas, Dylan, Jack, Leor, Mitchell, Philip, Rob, Robert, Sam, Tony, and Willie, the producers of the show. These guys are my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. Without them, this episode would not have been possible. Also brought to you by all those fine ladies and gentlemen, all those names you see on the screen, that ever-growing list of names that help support my work over on Patreon. They help pay the bills. I want to thank each and every one of those guys. If you'd like to support the channel, please do so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.